Mujeres. Today, we are once again wearing our education hats to learn more about an important topic that affects many of us. We have invited my sister, Loanna Abreu, who is a therapist. She's coming back to the podcast to chat about a topic that I think a lot of us don't really know about, and that's intersectionality. Because she's very knowledgeable about this and she's very passionate about the topic too, as a therapist. So I'm going to start by sharing the definition we found on the internet about intersectionality. And my sister can, let us know whether or not that's accurate, and she can continue to educate us about that. So the internet defines intersectionality as a framework for understanding how various social and political identities, such as race, class, gender, and sexual orientation, combine to create unique experiences of privilege and disadvantage. It highlights how these identities intersect and overlap, leading to different forms of discrimination and oppression. So we will be learning, once again, whether or not this is accurate with my sister, and I will welcome her to the podcast once again for the, what number is this? Like the 10th time.
She's exaggerating a little, but too many episodes at this point.
Because she loves to educate you guys. She loves to educate us, but also you guys. So, here we go. But we're going to start, dive right in with the questions, Loa. And the first one right here, just because there's probably new people, new listeners, and they don't know you very well, even though others may know you by now. And so you're one of the Latina therapist guests that we have previously invited to our chat to talk about various mental health related topics throughout the years by now, since like 2020, when we first launched our podcast. So the audience knows you very well, but there's people that do not, like I said before. So can you quickly tell us a little more about you and your background and what you're doing nowadays?
Absolutely. So thanks again for having me one more time in this podcast. So like my sister said, my name is Loanna Abreu, and I am a bilingual psychotherapist. I work at a local private practice here in Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan. I specialize in seeing individuals that identify as BIPOC and LGBTQ+. I help them with any presenting symptoms all the way from anxiety, depression, PTSD, racial identity, women's issues, relationship issues, pregnancy, prenatal, postpartum, life transitions, and honestly, many more. Whatever you got, I got you. And if I don't got you, I will refer you out to somebody that does. But essentially, I specialize in helping minorities, people that look like me, that sound like me, and women empowerment, hence why I'm here. And this podcast, if you want to learn more about me, just you can search me on Psychology Today. Just type in Loanna Abreu, and like all the information about my professional background will be in that profile as well.
Thank you, Loa. You are all things mental health. Love that.
That sums it up, yes.
We're going to tag some of those episodes in this episode show notes, because you do have lots of great deeds for us. Every episode I learn. I still remember the first one, Loa. It was more of a chat. It was two other girls too. And you were like, "Those, you're not saying anything. Like, you look like you're very intrigued." I'm like, "Yes, I'm over here taking notes." So that was the beginning of our journey here with mental health awareness. And it has indeed helped me a lot, and I'm sure has helped a lot of listeners. But with that said, let's dive into a little bit more on the topic of today's conversation, because I'm very interested. Like, when Jana brought this up to me, I was like, what is intersectionality? Like, I've never heard of that. So with that said, can you expand on what it is, and why does it matter, and how does it even relate to mental health?
So Jana pretty much gave a pretty good description, the internet's description of what it is. But essentially, intersectionality is a concept that was coined by a Black feminist scholar. Her name was Kimberly Crenshaw. For any of you that want to dive more into the topic, that will be the first person that you should Google and learn more about her. This term originated from her work in the legal field, because she has a law background, and critical race studies. And what critical race study is an academic field focused on relationships between social conceptions of race and ethnicity, social and political laws, and mass media. So essentially, all that to say, intersectionality is a framework that examines how various forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, classism, think of all the isms essentially at any given point, intersect and overlap with each other to create a unique experience of oppression or disadvantage for an individual at a certain point in time. This framework highlights how these systems of power and privilege can combine to shape an individual's life, experiences, live experiences. Think about like in a work setting, interpersonally with other folks too, how that might show up, all of those intersections, right? So I remember bringing this up to my sister because I'm like, I don't think people talk about this enough. And think about it, you show up with your intersections by existing every single day, right? But I think this is not often talked about enough in certain settings because you don't know what you don't know, right? But we all live with it every single day. And I think it's important to educate folks about it, especially in the work field, in the way that you interact with other individuals, so that you can understand that in many ways you can be an oppressed individual, but you also can have privilege. Like those two things can be true at a given point. And that's what intersectionality does. It shows you at a given point when can you have privilege and show up in allyship for somebody, or at least this is my personal take in it, right? You know, I think do your own due diligence in searching about the topic. But on my own experience, especially as a therapist and as an educator, and giving trainings on intersectionality, think about my own intersections and how do they show up as I interact with others um, in a given scenario. And I'll dig deeper into that. So I can give you essentially to just basic terms, intersectionality is when any of your identity, think about your race, your sex, your class, your ethnicity, all of that, in a given point in time, they all overlap or intersect. Or maybe just some of them do and some of them don't. And they either create barriers for you, aka oppression, or they create privilege for you, aka an advantage. So, an example that I can give you to make it more realistic. So, think about a Venn diagram, right? Like they overlap. And in the middle of the Venn diagram, I'm going to put myself as an example, it's me. And let's say the example is in a work setting, I'm trying to get a promotion or move to an executive level position. So, if we think about my race, I identify as Afro Latina. If we think about my age, I'm a millennial. If we think about my gender, I'm a cis woman, female. So all those three identities might, in this scenario, be an oppression or disadvantage for me if the peer that I'm going against is a white or cis male, right? Like between the two of us, who's gonna get the promotion? And we all been there. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, right? There's white males are very privileged in America. So over me in that situation, because of all these other identities, I have the disadvantage. More than likely, I'm gonna be oppressed, right? And that white female peer, male peer, is going to get the promotion. So, and this applies to many different scenarios. So think about these people that are disabled, right? Like I'm an able person. Think about certain things that you can do that they cannot do. We don't think about all of our privilege, right? Being able-bodied is a privilege if you think about it. Being bilingual is a privilege. Being a U.S. citizen and being documented is a privilege over those folks that are undocumented, that are disabled. And I'm gonna get a little bit deeper into that. There's a wheel of power and privilege that I'm gonna show you so that way you can really capture what it is that we're really trying to get at. But in that example, does that make sense, right? Like I chose certain identities of myself for that work example versus somebody else, how that show up, how my intersectionality shows up. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yep. I'm seeing the overlap. Excited to see that wheel. And for listeners, if you're listening to us on just audio, we're on YouTube. So also go click on that link so you can see what Loa's about to share.
Yeah. So essentially, let me share my screen right now. Can you both see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the Wheel of Power and Privilege, and I'm giving kudos to Sylvia Duckworth. She was the one that created this visual. But think about in the middle of the wheel. So here, this is where you have the most power or privilege. And the more you go outward, is the more marginalized or disprivileged that you become. So if we look at what's in the middle, it's being white, having an education, so higher education, being able-bodied, being heterosexual, being neurotypical, being robust, being slim, owning a house or property, being rich, speaking English. And think about when you think about a majority, right? In the United States, the main language is English. So in this case, that will be power. Being a cis male, right? That also gives you privilege. Being a citizen gives you a privilege. But the farther out that you go outside of the wheel, the more disprivileged and oppressed you become. So if we look at all the way out here, right? Being undocumented, being dark skinned, not having higher education, being disabled, being LGBTQ plus can make you be oppressed. And we all know this, right? I just feel like this does a pretty good job at giving you, like, in the scheme of things, how from within, sketching it out, how the farther you are from the center of the wheel, the more disprivileged you become. And also, these are just some forms of identities, right? Like skin color, formal education. There could be more, like your religion too can be a form of oppression or privilege too, right? If you think in West Michigan, there's a church in every single corner, I feel like, here. So sometimes, depending on the state, right, the whether you are rural or in an urban um, space, that also matters too. So think about, apply the will of privilege to your own context, right, where you are and the demographics that you are around. And even if you want to talk about it in a work setting, right, how does this show up with the individuals that you are in your team, right, or that might not be in your team, that might be in a different department? What does that look like? Because sometimes I feel like in certain levels of power, you have certain education, right? Versus like someone that might work in maintenance might not have the same degree that a CEO, right, has. So even thinking about within a corporation, how far away from power and power differential exists because of your identities. So all that to say, today we're here to talk about understanding your own privilege as it relates to your identities, but also knowing that although I know I am a marginalized person because I'm Latina, because I'm an immigrant, because of all these things, I am also privileged in the sense that I'm a cis woman, excuse me, that I am heterosexual, that I am married, that I own a home, right? Like, we don't think about those things as a privilege. And I feel like sometimes because we feel oppressed or because we are part of an ethnicity group, there's more to oppression than just race, right? There's so many other levels. And I hope that today folks can really think about, outside from skin color, right, which is a given. We all know that. What other forms of power and oppression do I hold? And how can I be more educate myself more about that, but also how can I show up in allyship for those that I know are being marginalized in comparison to me?
Well, this is very helpful to see the actual wheel and understanding all the different interceptions based on like yourself, like identifying yourself in the middle of the wheel and knowing what privileges you have, even though you're in a marginalized group or an oppressed group. And I think it's very important to know that because some of us can still, how people say like the pie, and it's like, oh, our other Latina counterparts may be taking on the pie, and that's not how it works, right? Like, we're trying to help each other, and if you made it, then like that means that I'm hoping that in the future you'll bring others with you, right? Based on your privilege at this point and your level of power because you made it there. So I think that's very important to know. I know. So the next question talks about like asking you about examples of like how that shows up, how intersectionality shows up at the workplace in a work environment. But you provided really, really good examples about that already, which, A++ for that. So I'm gonna ask you the next question so that we know a little more about how that is affecting specifically our communities, like our back. So what are some common ways you see these affecting our BIPOC communities, especially Latinas, right? Because our podcast is basically always empowering Latinas and making sure that we're like educating and empowering them. So how does that impact us, and how is it and when it's being overlooked, how does that affect us as Latinas?
I think, intersection affects everyone, right? It's not just us Latinos or marginalized folks. But when it comes to BIPOC and Latinas like us, I think it digs a little deeper because history has already told us that we are oppressed, right? Like even all three of us should not be here, right? Be educated, be in the corporate world, be a business owner. I have my own business. So thinking about all those things and what's being fed in social media, what's being fed generationally, right? Because what was told to our parents told us, and that carry on and on and on. So I think the bigger issue here is how do we shift that mindset to understanding that yes, we might be oppressed, but within that oppression, there is privilege, right? So I think that if you don't really tap into your intersections, you can be missing out on understanding how you can be part of the solution instead of the problem, right? Like if I only see myself as an oppressed individual, how am I ever gonna show allyship for folks that I know are disabled over me, or that are undocumented, right? I feel like especially for that population, like I was undocumented at a point in my life. Now that I do have, I am documented. How can I show up for them since I do know what that's like, right? So making sure that we're shifting our mindset from I'm an oppressed individual to yes, I am that, but also I am all these other things too. And how can I show up in allyship for those folks outside of my own oppression or my own privilege, right? Because I think it takes to know your own privilege in order for you to use that privilege for good. Because you can be privileged and do nothing with that privilege, which let's be honest, a lot of white folks do that. They're like, because I'm white. Like I didn't choose to be white, but I'm here, and then they do nothing about it. So let's not be that, although we're Latinos and Latinas, like you said, let's make sure that we're building each other up. How can I show up for you, right? Like if I know I'm in an executive level and I sit at the table, how do I bring those other Latinas that I know that they're striving for that, right? If we're talking about a work setting, right? Or even mom to mom, if I know I am a documented working mom and I have a friend that's undocumented, has children, right? In today's administration, what does that look like for her? And not just how to be an ally, but understanding that, people are going through stuff, like these are tough times mentally, emotionally, financially for oppressed populations, meaning BIPOC, meaning LGBTQ plus individuals. It's no longer just us immigrants being attacked. It's a lot of other oppressed populations too. So also understanding that I am an ally and I have privilege over LGBTQ plus folks because I know I don't identify as LGBTQ plus. I am a heterosexual woman. So I know within that, I don't have the experience that a queer Black woman might be going through in this economy and in this administration. So understanding that, yes, we have our own issues, but there's other folks too that are struggling too. How can we show up for them, right? Or at least if you don't know how to do that, start working on yourself, right? Like what are if you can just Google the wheel of power and privilege, where am I from the center of the wheel? And it might be that you're not at the center, and that's okay too, right? Who do I know that might be closer to power that can champion me? Whether that's at work, whether it's as a friend, in whatever way, shape, or form, right? You don't know what you don't know until you get out there and seek out the information.
Yeah, I simply put it this way: just because it doesn't affect you doesn't mean that it's not a problem.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
Love it. No, I was actually counting to see how privileged I was. No,
She was doing her little homework on the back end.
I'm already thinking what's going to be the call to action. I was like, I wonder if there's even a test for this. Like, when you tally, oh, well, if you got this score, this is where you land on. But I was actually looking at it in the lens like, okay, like I've always grown up saying like, oh, you're privileged because you have parents that can have always provided for you. But there's things on that wheel. So the center, I'm like, doesn't talk about generational wealth, even though part of the rich comes in there. But I didn't even count myself as rich because I'm middle class. But there are like 6 other ones that I fall into those buckets, and it's like I'm already thinking like, okay, how can I start helping people that are in those buckets, that I could be an example, I could be an advocate for them, as you were saying at the table. So thank you so much, Laura. I'm already understanding so much more. You see, I hope that's what
And
the listeners are also
and to
experiencing.
your point, I don't want folks or people listening to think that just what shows up in the wheel, that's the only intersections, right? There's so much
Mhm.
more identities. This is just a visual for you to kind of be able to see and
Open
understand,
your
right? Because
mind.
I,
Yeah.
yes, right. But also to your point, Rosie, I do want you to think outside of this wheel, right? Like in what other ways my identities are help
Mhm.
like going towards oppression or make me a privileged individual, right? It's not just this here. I think you can have privilege in many other areas that doesn't have to fall just into isms. And I think something that I want to highlight, I feel like, and this is just my personal opinion, don't come for me,
Mhm.
intersections focus a lot in oppression. And I try to do my best today to also talk about, yes, it is based from an oppression model, but you can also use this for privilege, right? To understand your own privilege so that way you know, okay, yes, I know I have all these other things that might not be working for me, but there's all these other things that are working towards something for me, right? And to your point, Rosie, is I feel like sometimes I don't know anyone that sits every day and thinks about, let me think of all my identities and see where I fall and who I am, right? And that's the point, right? And I think that tying it into mental health, that's the thing. A lot of us don't have enough time in the day to just decompress and think about what did I endure today alone, right? Like, how was that interaction with Karen? Why did she treat me like this, right? And maybe that's your daily interaction with Karen and you just got used to it. You're so desensitized, right? But this is the part where I want you to do take the pause. Like you took the time to listen to this podcast today. Please, my call to action will be at least just entertain this wheel for 2 seconds, right? See where your barriers and see where you do have things going for you and how does that show up in your daily interactions. And again, it's not just to talk about you, but think about when I interact with other humans, what might their experience be like, right? Because I think even for disabled people, because I'm not disabled and I can only speak from my own experience, you don't think about the struggle of getting into a city bus. You don't think about the struggles of, let's say, you work at a workplace where they only have stairs and they don't have an elevator. How does that look like for that individual every single day? And that's something so little. Even when we talk about neurodiversity or being neurodivergent, I don't think people talk about that enough either. We can do a podcast on that topic another day too. But I think intersectionality, neurodiversity is not enough talked about. And these are topics that happen and people deal with every single day. And I think the more you educate yourself, the more you can be a better human and understand what might that person be going through. Although you don't have to have their identity, you don't have to have their issues, right? But if you are just self-aware and understand, like, oh, damn, I could totally see how that might be an issue for them, right? Even when you're having hard conversations with your direct reports, with your spouse, right? Just because you know your spouse, you don't know what inner demons they might be fighting or where they fall in this wheel too, right? Because you can be with somebody that might be undocumented, right? Maybe you are a US citizen, but your spouse is undocumented. What is your spouse's experience like every single day? Or even think about in marriage, right? If you're white and your spouse is black, the experience that you both are living are very different, although you're married to each other. And then bring your kids into the mix, right? Like, what if your kid has autism or is disabled? Your kid's experience, although your kid might be Hispanic, although you're raising your kid, their life experience is very different than yours. So all that to say, I just want you to think about, yes, where do I fall in my intersections? But when I see others, can I see how their intersectionality might show up for them on a daily basis? And how can I show up in allyship and not make it harder for them?
Love that. All right. I hope everyone took notes. If not, rewind a little bit. So Laura, with that, have you ever had to confront or challenge bias, like within yourself, the profession, or institutions related to intersectional identities?
I'm gonna be honest. When I saw that question, I laughed so hard
You're like, every
because
day.
all of the above, all of the above, all of the above. Just because I'm a therapist doesn't mean I don't have my own. I'm fighting my own demons every single day, literally. So when I saw this, seriously, like I think about within myself, like I think even my sister told me this once. If you have a pulse, you have bias. So I love that you guys mentioned bias because within bias, microaggression, too, bias is the vehicle for microaggressions, right? And in the way that bias and microaggression, these are two things that intersect with intersectionalities, right? Because you see someone that's disabled, you're already having your own biases about people that are disabled or about Black folks or about Latino folks. Because let me tell you, there's no more isms colorism within our own race, right? Like there's so much in group um issues than outer groups sometimes. And it is within in groups that sometimes the most issues happen when we're supposed to, like Gamma said, building each other up, helping each other. But why are we tearing each other down and competing against each other, right? So I feel like when it comes to intersectionality, bias, and microaggressions, that is something that yeah, I'm a therapist, but I'm not perfect. I do have my moment of like, ooh, girl, that was judgmental AF. I need to check myself before I wreck myself, especially when you're holding space for other individuals. Like, I have my own life experience, right? And then I carry all these other life experiences, right? And sometimes I might drift in a session where the client is going off about something, and I'm just like, girl, I would have not done that. And then I'm like, ooh, girl, you need to chill out before you say that out loud. So again, yes, my biases might show up, but I think that the more like I've been doing this for almost 10 years already. And so the more you do the work within yourself and also as a therapist, the more you know to catch those moments, right? Like the more you know when countertransference is happening, the more I know like I'm feeling something right in the session and I'm just like, why am I feeling this? Mind you, like the client is going on and I'm like, and I'm interacting. And at the same time, my mind is like trying to process why am I having this reaction to this individual. And think about it. I see people that look like me, that sound like me, especially women. I see Latina queer women a lot. So although I'm not queer, there's so much more that I can relate to with them. And then I can understand for them understanding that I am privileged, that I am not LGBTQ plus. How can I show up for them in allyship and understand all of those intersections? I know that I gave a lot of good examples, but I have a good one. And I'm going to tie it into mental health that I think I became very passionate about intersectionality because as a therapist, I deeply believe that you should have an understanding of that as you treat your clients, right? Because I feel like if you don't understand all the different identities that a client, a person, an individual might hold, how can you really service the whole person, right? Like, I have a client, she's a millennial, she's queer, and she came to therapy with me because she has childhood sexual abuse. So in order for me, I understood as I walked alongside her that I needed to understand, okay, in a traditional Hispanic family, what does it look like to be bisexual? When I know in our community that's frowned upon, right? Like we don't, they, especially that generation, our parents' generation, they don't believe in that stuff. Pray it away, you don't go to therapy about it. So I had to understand what does that look like for her, right? Even coming to therapy, that was an issue. She didn't tell her family she was coming to therapy for years because she was afraid of what they were gonna say. So if she didn't tell them about therapy, imagine about her sexual identity. And then the sexual abuse happened within her family. Add that too, and that person continues to be in her family. So like there's so many layers, right? So I feel like the more I did the work, the more I needed to understand all the different identities that my clients hold in order for me to better service them, right? Again, I don't have to share that identity. I just need to understand how might that be a barrier for them, and how can I show up for them in support, in resources, in allyship, in processing that, right? Because like she didn't even know how she was feeling about certain things, she was exploring her sexuality, she didn't know how to communicate that to her parents. There's a lot there, right, to unpack. And not trying to unpack her session here, but like that's just one little example that I'm giving you, right? So for I hope that you're getting the picture, right? There's just so much more. And I feel like the better you're able to understand intersections, identities, the better you can understand other people. And again, you don't have to be a therapist. This is not for you to be like, oh my gosh, no. This is how can I better interact with others? And I believe we did a podcast on emotional intelligence. Then combine that podcast with this one. Imagine how powerful could you be as a human, being emotional intelligence and understanding intersectionality. Like, chef kiss. Come on now, drop the mic. Thank you for having me here. I'm just kidding.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
But you get it. I hope you get it.
Yes, yes, we do. And that reminded me earlier when you were talking about those things, like, we listen in your therapy sessions, we listen and we don't judge.
Don't judge.
So I can only imagine.
Yes, yes.
But my next question, it's talks about mental health challenges in Latina. So, and I'm going to actually take this a little further than what we than the areas that we have asked about for you. So, can you tell us what unique mental health challenges do you see in Latinas navigating their regular multicultural, bicultural identities, and who may be a working mom and are married, and they're, maybe like the eldest daughter, and like all those other things. You see what I'm saying? So like when we add all those unique things for it in those like intersections, I guess, like for those Latinas, like what common unique challenges, mental health challenges do you see in those women that maybe we need to be paying attention a little more, or maybe they need to be addressed in a certain way? Like what do you think about that? Tell us.
First thing, I'm like, are you talking about yourself, girl? Because you sound
I don't know. I'm just throwing examples out there, but hey.
I'm letting her, because I'm in the same characteristics.
I'm like,
I see a lot of identities and overlap here.
Hey, if the hat fits or the shoe fits, then
Where, yes, I hear you. Yes. That is a loaded question, right? Because I feel like just by having all those identities, we are just by being a woman, period. If we take away all the other layers, I just think being a woman in this world, especially in the United States, it's so effing hard. And then you're like, I'm a mom now. Oh, girl, don't even. Well, we just did a podcast about that. So if you haven't listened to the podcast, go listen to that one too.
Go check it out.
Listen, I have all the plugs for all the podcasts here. But no, seriously though, like I just feel like being a woman and then adding being a mother and then adding being the elder sister. And not just the older sister, there's also middle child syndrome. I'm a middle child, so shout out to my middle children Latina out there. I feel you, sis. We all have issues, right? So I feel like when it comes to mental health, I feel like, especially like I want to focus on the first layer that you described. You said bicultural, multicultural identities. I feel like most clients that come to me that are bicultural or multicultural, that one of the biggest issues is feeling that they're not enough. And what I mean by that is that once you have like this split identity, right? Like let's say you're Black and Mexican, right? Sometimes when you're with your Black family or like those folks inside of your family that are Black, then you're not Black enough. And then when you're with your Mexican side, you're not Mexican. And even if we don't even talk about, if we remove the ethnicity, I think sometimes even when it comes to being a mom, sometimes we don't feel like we're enough, right? Or like we're doing enough, that we're failing in so many different pockets of our life. So like I think all of this is relatable to all of the things that you just asked me about. So feeling like you're not enough, feeling like you're being other. I don't know if anyone has heard of the term othering, but othering means when people make you feel like you don't belong, right? Like you're an alien, right? Like I don't know if any of you ever had a alien number when you did your papers. Even in the documentation, it already ostracizes you, right? It makes you feel like you're something else, like you're not human, right? So, imposter syndrome. I think that shows up for many of us, but I feel like it's more high end in minority groups, right? Because society and media is telling us that we're not supposed to be where we're at, right? Especially if you're women in power, right? Women that have privilege over other generations, over other folks too, right? Like cultural appropriation. I remember a perfect example. I always wanted to do 23andMe for the longest. And I did a DNA test to find out my background. Um, and not gonna lie, one of the reasons why I wanted to do it is because I felt that I couldn't do certain things because I didn't feel like once I moved to the United States, I always identified with the Black community a lot, right? So I felt like I remember wanting to get braids, and I was just like, but if I do, is that cultural appropriation? Can I do that? And 23andMe, and I know this is super stupid, but I'm just being vulnerable with y'all here and your listeners. I never felt so seen when I got my results. So for those of you that are curious, I'm 45% sub-Saharan African, so I am Black, and 45.2% European. So I am white. I have some whiteness in me. I'm colonizing Israel. So, but when I saw that half of me is Black, half of me is European descent, white, right? I was just like, I can wear braids. It's not cultural appropriation. And I remember telling some of my Black friends, and they were all like, girl, we all knew you were Black. Like, it's okay. I mean, look at my skin color. Even think about me and my sister. I mean, you're looking at us right now. Me and my sister look nothing alike, but we are related, right? And Janet does have some Blackness in her. Another deep dive for another podcast in another session. But all that to say, I feel like bringing it back to the point of mental health and how this all applies to specifically Latina women, I feel like, again, othering, imposter syndrome, cultural appropriation, not feeling like you're enough, right? Being pulled 1,000 ways, having all of these identities. And even if we pinpoint in being a working mom, I don't know for y'all, but like once I became a mom, even just know, until this day, I cannot tell you that I know who I am now. So I think I don't know, probably takes time. I don't know if y'all just were 1 month for postpartum, you're like, I got this. I know who I am.
No.
Cannot
Hey,
relate. I'm struggling.
it's been 8 years and I still don't know who I am.
To
So
clarify, she said 8 years. So, okay, I'm tracking. I'm good. I'm about to be 1 year
I'm
postpartum.
I'm
And I
I'm
feel
still
like I
trying to
know
figure it
nothing.
out. I'm
It's
still
been
trying to
12
figure
years
it out.
for me.
See?
And
I don't
all
think
that
you
to
ever
say,
do.
you're supposed to give me hope. What happened to the hope here?
We're just
But
real
I
here.
appreciate the realness, yes. And again, when you relate that to mental health too, it takes years, right? For you to do the work, for you to identify those feelings, right? Like it's what I'm feeling, imposter syndrome, right? Some folks they just feel, right? They don't know that it's depression, they don't know that it's anxiety, they don't know that it's imposter syndrome, they don't know that it's ADHD, whatever it is, right? Especially in our population, in our group, like therapy is still very taboo. People feel, many research shows that Latino folks show their mental illnesses physically. People will tell you, oh, I have headaches, my back hurts, I'm stressed, but it could be related to depression, it could all be related to anxiety. The mind and the body are very connected. Um, so if you're not treating the mind, the body's gonna feel it. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say to put a plug here, but we did have an episode where we talked about
Chronic pain.
chronic pain and how it relates to mental health. So if you want to learn more about that and how they're both connected, go listen to it.
I'm telling you, all the plugs today.
We're going to run out of space for all the episode links on the show notes.
I mean, it's real though. Like if you think
Yeah.
about it, I understand so much more about intersectionality and how it affects me, but also everyone around me and understanding that even though, like you said, Loa, I may be marginalized, in many ways, I'm also very privileged. And I don't really think about those things. And that's important. And also to your point, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a point in time, this is a story about my sister and I, but there was a point in time that I think she was at I don't know if it was an event, I can't remember, but she was somewhere where she was doing something for work. And she had experienced for the first time what is racism, essentially, because her and I, if you just she just said it, right, like we were sisters, but she looks a little different than I do, and she has experienced things that I have never experienced, which is, you would think it's interesting because we are sisters, and we're both Latinas, we're both I mean, you could say a little bit Afro Latina with the same background, kind of, and we still have different experiences. And to me, it was mind blowing the fact that she did experience that because of her, her skin color and the way her hair looks. And if you put the both, the two of us together, typically, she gets the like, oh, she seems like she's kind of like black, but I don't look that way. So people don't really think that I am black. So it's very interesting how those things can happen and you don't really think about the fact that it's also related to like intersectionality as well, and how you identify and where you are and how privileged you may be because of those
Yeah,
differences.
I love so much that you brought up that point, because I remember when I was telling her my experience, and she told me, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, when I tell you, I was shook to my core. And I don't know why that never crossed my mind, right? Like I just felt like, oh, you're Latina, I'm Latina, we're gonna go through the same struggle. And no, right? Like me and Jana we have very different life experience. Mind you, very similar backgrounds. We're both very educated women. We're both in position of power, like you name it. But even in a work setting, I have endured so much more gaslighting, racism, all the things. And that just heightened to me like, damn, having white skin tone versus dark skin tone is real. And like we had a conversation about that. I told her like, well, it makes sense because you're white passing, and we could have a conversation about that too. But think about it. My sister, I mean, she has some color to her because she just went to Cancun. But anywho, on a normal day, she wouldn't be this bad. She will be very white passing, and then she has black straight hair. So like there's a lot of straights. And tying that to intersectionality, we make a lot of assumptions based on what we see, right? But like sometimes you can have a disability and not be physical. So again, tying it back to microaggressions, to biases, not making assumptions, right? This is why I want you to actually think about your intersections, but also that of others. If you're seeing someone struggling, but from the looks of it, you're like, oh, but they're white, they're male. And this is something I work a lot with my clients. Again, all the clients that I see are BIPOC and they're very oppressed and marginalized. And in the current administration, they feel a lot of feels about it. And I have to remind them all the time, just because people are white doesn't mean they don't have struggles too. I understand that we live in America and people think that, oh, white people have it great. But you can be white and be LGBTQ plus and be disabled and not have a home, be homeless. Like, you can be white and then have everything else that's not going for you. And that means you are oppressed. So also disassociating everything just race, race, race. I feel like that's so much fed to us. Yes, it is important. And yes, we feel it, right? But there's so much more, right? Like there's so much more to John that's executive. And you're like, oh, he probably have it good. He always getting promoted. But we don't know behind closed doors what John is dealing with, right? So all that to say, just be kind. Be kind to each other, because just because we look at you, you don't know all the other identities that those people are holding that are causing them harm.
Yeah, I think it's how someone pretty much kind of say that to me all the time, and they pretty much say that like assume positive intent even if you don't want to, and then just assume that they don't know what they don't know. They don't know any better, so they just because they're acting that way. They just don't know your struggles. They don't know what's going on the back end. So like seeking to understand. I think that's like, for a lack of better words, like seeking to understand why that's happening. If something's happening, it's a lot better than like, I guess, making assumptions, right there and then.
Yeah.
Yep. Facts to all of that, guys. I have a brother and I go through the same thing. He looks white next to me. And that's how
And
it is.
listen, let's not even talk about sexism, like being a male versus
Yeah.
that could be a whole other podcast.
But once the skin color, even in high school, same last name. You guys have same mother and father. I'm like, yes. Like, why is it so hard to believe?
Happens to me and Jana all the time. And what really irks me is that they assume que yo soy el problema. They're like, you sure? Same mom, same dad? Like, tú no fuiste una cosita por ahí. And I'm like, no, same mom, same dad. We're like 100% siblings.
So with all that said, Loa, like how do you navigate your own identities in a space where you're holding space for others?
Especially as a therapist, right? Like I know you covered a little bit about this before, but like, what do you do? Like what exercises do you try to do on a daily basis to ensure that your inner demons that you're fighting do not, intersect?
Or even body language and not having, like having the poker face y todo eso.
I love this question, and it's a loaded question, but kind of like what I said earlier, I feel like it's practice, it's time, it's experience, it's imperfection. I'm very honest with my clients. I always tell them, I'm like a pair of jeans that you're trying on. I'm not for everyone. Like what you see is what you get. Because early on in my career, I understood that I am not for everyone, and I didn't want to be for everyone. When you go to, especially again, I want people to think about I'm only speaking from my own live experience, and I can only speak on that. So based on my live experience and my professional background, when I went to school, they teach you to be a white therapist seeing white clients. What's the problem with that? I'm not white and my clients are not white. So like I had to do a lot of self-work and even with other peers and with my licensed supervisor too, to like let go of that. Because also I'm a like rule follower. Like I'm very like ethic driven. Like I don't want to lose my license. I want to make sure that I'm actually helping my clients and not harming them. So I remember when I had the incline to like just work with my community, and by working with my community being like women that look like me, that sounded like me. And I not just see women. I have brought in, like the fact that now working in private practice, I can choose who I see. I didn't know when I was like a baby therapist. I remember telling my supervisor, like, is that ethical? Can I do that? She's like, yeah, like you can choose who you want to see. And like, I never felt so validated and seen. And I cannot tell you, I have been the most happiest the moment I decided to make my niche, seeing people that look like me, that sounded like me. And with that being said, I think there comes a level of authenticity and realness. And that's what I tell my clients. Like, I don't know who you saw before, but I am not them. And I'm just very raw and open and honest because just how you can fire me, I can fire you. If as a client you are harmful to me, I don't have to stay your therapist. I feel like sometimes people forget that it's a two-way street. It's a two relation, right? It's a professional relationship, yes. But if I don't even feel safe in my own sessions, how can I be a good therapist for you, right? Sometimes you do have to have those hard conversations. So from the jump, I am very open and I state, this is how I function, this is how I work, this is my theoretical approach, does this work for you? They're like, okay, cool, okay, bet. But we're gonna have 3 sessions to really see if you're cool with this, Because una cosa cuando alguien dice sí y después they're in it and they're like, whoa, okay, she really meant that, huh? And unto this day, I remember someone asked me, how would your client describe you? And I told them, real, I don't sugarcoat anything, but I am the best support that you ever have to. And literally, this is feedback that clients have given to me, that they feel seen, they feel validated. They don't have to explain their ethnicity to them. They don't have to explain to me what a quinceañera is. They don't have to explain to me that there's a lot of sexual abuse that happens in Hispanic household, and they don't have to explain to me that it was their father that abused them for 15 years. Like, and I know that's deep, right? But I think that the more I learn to be authentic within myself, and also boundaries, right? Like I decide what do I want to share with my clients and what I don't need to share with them. Because just like I am very vulnerable and open, I'm also very heavy on boundaries, because I don't want to carry all that back home. Like now I have a baby to care for, right? And to be mentally stable for, so I cannot bring everything home. But back to your point, it's practice, it's time, it's experience. Like I said, I've been doing this for 10 years almost, which is insane for me to think because I'm still young. I'm not old, but I just started doing this at a young age. And, there's nothing that the experience is gonna give you versus a degree. A degree is not gonna give you what you need. It was great to have that paper, and yes, because I have that paper, I get to practice. But it's not until I was in it, seeing real people with real issues, and even me working through my own issues. Because sometimes you're gonna have clients, especially now that I'm a mom. I have clients that are literally, when I tell you, I'm just like, oh my God, I am going through the same thing. And I'm just fighting not to tell them, oh my God, girl, I went through the same thing today, because like boundaries, right? But I'm just like, okay, like there's so much validation. Like my clients at least help me grow as an individual too. And validate me without them even knowing them, make me feel seen, right? Because I'm just like, okay, God, I'm not the only one like struggling, right? Like we're all going through things. And sometimes just reminding them, like, I'm not perfect. I will mess up, and I have messed up, but I owned up to my um f ups sometimes. Even in session, I'm like, ooh, that didn't land how I wanted to. Let me take it back and let me rephrase that, right? And just owning that and letting them know, like, hey, I dropped the ball, or hey, I'm reminding them because I think there's an uh, um power out, struggle where they see you in this authoritative position, and it's just like, nah, chill. I'm human. I'm just like you, and I'm struggling too, right? So even just taking that layer of like, I'm this grandiose individual that makes no mistake and has no life outside of work. Sometimes you have to remind them, like, some clients are like, oh my gosh, you do have a baby. I forgot. And I'm like, you shouldn't have to remember, but yes, I do. Because when we're scheduling, I'm like, well, it's my daughter's birthday's coming up. I'm not working that week. And they're like, you have a baby. And I'm like, I was on maternity leave and I wasn't seeing you. But anyway, that's beside the point. But just reminding them that you are human. You do have a life outside of work. And I think the more you do the work, you learn to how to self-care, right? Like what does that, again, we did a podcast on self-care too, y'all. Go look for it. That looks very different from everybody, right? Like what self-care might look like for me might be different from Rosie, from Dana, right? So just understanding what works for you and knowing what you need and when you need it, which I know is hard. But again, the more you struggle, the more you're in it, the more you figure out like, hey, in a moment of anger, this is what I need. In a moment of sadness, this is what I need. So just navigating you and trying to be your most authentic self, to me, has been the most rewarding and more successful thing once I holding space for folks. But I'm not gonna lie, nowadays in this administration has been one of the toughest times to be a therapist of color. Let me rephrase that, because things that my clients are going through affect me too, right? I'm an immigrant. I have family that are undocumented that are struggling. I'm a mom. I have friends that are LGBTQ plus. I have like there's just so much going on that affects me as a person too. And then I have to hold space for them. I also have my own therapist too. So I take care of others and someone takes care of me too.
Mhm.
I think I
As
cannot
you
preach that
should.
enough. Yes, everyone needs therapy. La terapia no es para los locos. People that look like you, that sound like you, all three of us, it's okay for me to disclose. I've gone to therapy. And that's okay. Everyone needs it at some point in time. And if you never have, this is the perfect time for you to start going to therapy. If you need a referral, hit me up. Let me know.
Psychology Today.
Yes.
Okay, so we can talk about this topic and all the other topics for a long time. And we don't want to do that because we know our listeners only have a certain amount of, like attention span. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you the last question just so that you can wrap it up and sum it all up, essentially. So at the end of the day, now that we're closing up the episode, what are some small ways we can all show up for our mental health with more awareness of our intersectional identities?
That's a great question. So, like I said, just if you take anything, look at the wheel, or do your own research too, right? Like if this wasn't enough, do your own research, understand your identities. Also, don't just stay in the box of I'm marginalized and oppressed. I know who you are. Yes, I hear you. But also, it takes for you to grow out of that to search for in what other ways I am privileged, right? And once you're doing that work, show up for yourself too, right? Like, I think it doesn't matter what topic we're talking about. Existing nowadays is hard. And then adding all the identities that you have, like Dana mentioned, if you're a mom, wife, sister, daughter, working mom, all the things, right? All the things. I don't have to go on and on. You know your own identity. So even based on that, what is it that you need for you? Because remember, how can we be good to others if we're not good to ourselves? And how can you be good to yourself if you don't even know what your self care looks like? And I'm not gonna lie, guys, 9 times out of 10, when I ask people what does self care look like to you, they have no idea what to say. So even tying it back to that, figure it out, right? Like, yes, I know you have to hold it down for every single human in your life, it feels like sometimes, but you deserve time too. If you make the time for them, you should be making the time for you too. Period. You're
That was
muted.
mic drop.
Mic drop. That's what I was going to say. Mic drop. Drop the mic.
Well, Lo already gave us some call to actions, so I don't have to repeat that homework. So I'm just going to close it real quickly. Thank you so much, Loa. Thank you everyone for listening. Please go back and rewind to those spots that you want to listen to. Look at the links that are in the show notes, and I'll just leave the short closing remarks that even though we may not know what intersectionality is, now we know a little bit more, but these are the key words that we use all the time. And even it was said in this podcast is put yourself in other shoes, be kind, because everyone is already fighting their own battles. And like Loa just said, it's already living in this world right now, it's already hard enough. So thank you so much for tuning in. And Loa, you're almost gonna be like, we should just call it Tres Bol Latinas now because you've been with us so much.
Seriously.
Love to be here.
Bueno, pues gracias. Hasta la próxima. Chao.